It's Giles Brown.
I've been looking forward to doing this interview since it first landed with a thud on my desk. The book is called Around the World in 80 Minutes, In Search of Rugby's Greatness, Contrasting Characters, Colliding Cultures, The Same Oval-Shaped Ball. A journey to find the game's most remarkable people, teams and places. It's been written by Rob Kitson, who's been the Guardian's rugby union correspondent since 1999. Delighted to say that Rob joins us not from a muddy field somewhere in the Heathrow fly past, but from a studio somewhere. Rob, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon. Nice to be here.
Pleasure's all mine. Whereabouts are you, mate?
Well, I'm down in Devon actually, so a little bit away from you, but the sun is shining, and it's a nanosecond where the rugby season's taking a bit of a pause, after the Olympics and before it all starts again. So it's a funny time of year. I don't feel, I'm not quite sure what to do with myself.
Yeah, it was quite something, wasn't it? I mean, the Sevens actually being in the Olympics, and France's captain actually getting what he went for. If he'd failed, the repercussions would have been quite something.
Well, there was no pressure, was there? The opening weekend, Stade de France, all full. They rigged the whole competition for him, but didn't he deliver? Gosh, wasn't he great? And I think, beyond France, beyond the individuals concerned, it was just a great tournament for the sport, I think, because it did spread that gospel a little bit, men and women. I thought it came across really well from the bits I saw.
You've been writing about, 1991 was the first World Cup that you covered?
Well, yeah. Let's not dwell too much on that. But yeah, that is true. But I am 108. It is true. But no, I've been going for a while. I've been the Guardian for 25 years, which is a lot of spelling mistakes in anybody's language.
No, but the reason I bring that, apart from to say, blimey, wasn't that a long time ago? And I still think we should have scored that try. But it's just the way that rugby has changed. I mean, if you were to take a time machine back and look at, Philip de Granville's England team of 1991, you would think, blimey, what is going on here?
Well, I think those baggy shirts, for a start, weren't they? Have sort of gone out of fashion. No, I mean, so much has changed. I would say even more recently than that. The 10 or 15 years, professionalism obviously had a great impact. I mean, that was one of the reasons for writing the book, because I'm not sure. We've all got such short attention spans, a lot of us, haven't we? And we can't remember what happened last season, or maybe even 3 or 4 years ago, unless it was a massive World Cup. And so I just wanted to dwell into the people and the places, as you say, the men and women who made a bit of a difference over sort of 50 years rather than the last 5. Because
rugby is different. I mean, trying to explain rugby to somebody who doesn't get rugby and the ethos and the lifestyle is like trying to explain, to a Martian, I don't know why penguins don't fly. It's unintelligible. But there are certain things about being at a rugby match or being in a rugby clubhouse or playing bad rugby, as I did for several years, that are sort of set the bar, don't they? And I use the word bar advisedly.
I think there's probably two things. You've got to have a little bit about you in some respect to play. Just to want to go on the field, because it's, at some point it's probably going to hurt, or it could hurt. And then the other, you've got to, you've got to give a little bit of yourself. It's not a solitary sport, individual sport. It's a team sport and I don't think there's many team sports out there which you have to give as much maybe as rugby in terms of, to your teammates. You can't do it on your own. It's not one of those sports. I know we talked about Antoine Dupont, who might be the exception who proves the rule, but by and large, you can't do it on your own, and I think there's that shared joy, that shared experience is a massive part of it. Certainly has been for me over the years.
And for many people, so the Rugby World Cup is the introduction, the be-all and end-all. But if you think about the first Rugby World Cup, what is it, 87? Hardly anybody knew it was on, wasn't it? And it's quite funny because, Six Nations was the thing, and, obviously Australia, South Africa, and who weren't even playing in 87, but obviously Australia and New Zealand kept knocking 7 bells out of each other. But teams like Argentina and Western Samoa, as it was then, and Japan was a laughingstock. And just to see how far the game has gone globally, when you're getting Argentina sides that beat the All Blacks, when you're getting Japan teams that beat South Africa, and the emergence of the Pacific nations as well.
I think so. But we always want more, don't we? And you're right. It has come a really long way from those days when maybe, the New Zealand were rampant, weren't they? Nobody could beat them. It was a sort of a bit of a race for second place. I think the only frustration is that there maybe haven't been more Portugals, if you like. I wrote this book, and if I was writing it now, you'd definitely have a decent chapter on Portugal, maybe Spain, maybe the Netherlands. Those the countries who are sort of around and about and are trying to push on through. And I think, Georgia being another one, and they haven't always had the support over the years. And I think that's been one of, our great frustrations writing about the sport. The Pacific Islands have been a classic example for years. Great, brilliant, wheel them on for the World Cup. Look what they can do. Yeah. Fantastic. And then we'll pack you in a cupboard for 4 years. So I think, more needs to be done. But you're right. If you look at it in the round, that I was happened to be at that Japanese win over South Africa, and there's a bit about it in the book. I had a chat with Eddie Jones about it, and you don't forget those sort of games in a hurry.
So when it comes to sort of picking what you're going to do around the world in 80 minutes, I mean, where do you start? How do you not let your own national feelings come into it? Because, I mean, looking at the list, Campo, blimey, that must have been an interest, because he's not backwards and coming forwards. He wasn't on the pitch, and he certainly is not in the commentator's booth or in the interview booth.
No, I didn't want to, to be too self-indulgent, clearly, because it's not about me. But I did want it to sort of reflect, the last 50 years. What got me into rugby was the sort of the Barbarians against the All Blacks, 73, Gareth Edwards, Phil Bennett. I'm that sort of vintage, and so it was a bit of a sort of meandering trip from there, really. And I happened to go to Australia and saw Campo at a sort of impressionable age. I happened to be in Scotland studying up there. And so there was it's a little bit of a personal meander. But as I say, Campo was great. He phoned me out of I'd sort of sent a message into the ether and said maybe that, I'd love to talk to him. And one day out of the blue, he phones back and said, yeah, mate, what do you want to know? And it's just great. I have to say, that sort of thing. The guys who get to the top in rugby, I think, generally tend to be really fascinating people. They don't have to be special. We're not saying that if you're special on the pitch, you're special off it. But I think you do have something, as I say, something slightly different about you. You've got to have something about you in some respect. I really like that, I must say. Something about you. Brian O'Driscoll. God on a pitch. I mean, if there's ever a player, he had something about him in space. And this is the other thing about rugby, rugby greats and rugby players. They tend to be very approachable. They don't tend to be, you don't have to go through O'Driscoll might be a little bit different, but they don't tend to have reams of PR people and marketing and the whole situation. So is it a little easier to approach a rugby person rather than a football, for example? Well, I'm sure it is. I haven't done a lot of football for many years, but I'm absolutely sure it is. I've got to say that I was really grateful to all the people who did speak to me, because they were very generous with their time and when they didn't have to be. I think, and again, I think that's one of the things that rugby maybe doesn't make the most of it. It's a great, not just a family sport, but it's a sport which should be approachable. And I think that's pro rugby's mainly perhaps made a mistake of going away from that. And we've got to be like football. We've got to be behind the ivory tower. We've got to make ourselves, I must get my agent, not talk to anybody. I honestly think that inclusivity, particularly with the women's rugby as well, men's rugby, I think it's a massive part of it. If you can keep that, if you lose that, you've got a slight problem, I think. Particularly with football being as big as it is.
Yeah, because football's always going to be the biggest sport. And rugby was a lot of people think it got too professional or it set the wrong role model. But women's rugby, I had the great honour of interviewing Maggie a couple of months ago, and she was brilliant. Absolutely. And if people say, "Oh yeah, but it's only women's rugby," the way that exactly you're shaking your head, but the way women's rugby has come on, and the way sevens has come on, both in female and male versions, and that's an interesting dilemma for rugby, because I remember watching, what was it, Delalio and the Prince Harriman, what was 93, is it, when they win
up in Murrayfield?
Up in Murrayfield, and you look at that bunch, the Dark Lord, she's himself, Chris Sheesby, you're grinning now, but nobody sort of followed it. It was something that the forwards, the backs could do and flounce around a bit, but now, DuPont aside, it's kind of a different game, isn't it?
Well, I think so. I think I mean, going back to the women's rugby in particular, I was lucky enough to go to the Women's World Cup in New Zealand, and the final, I don't know if you saw it, but that New Zealand-England final, I'd recommend actually anybody go back to watch it on tape, because it was outstanding game. New Zealand knew they couldn't compete in the forwards. He played brilliantly. Coach Wayne Smith was the sort of architect of it. Fantastic. And they set it up nicely for next year's Women's World Cup, which is in England, starts in August next year. And I think that'll be huge. And I think in terms, again, of drawing in, I hate the phrase eyeballs, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
New people to come and have a little look and say, oh, what's this sport about? And the Olympics did it, as you say, with sevens. And I think it'll happen again potentially with the Women's World Cup next year.
How do you think we're going to get away from, as Colin called them, what was it, old farts in suits? Because they're still around, and that's perhaps one of the things that's holding rugby back and holding the emerging nations back. I mean, that's the biggest frustration. I mean, Clive Woodward famously said that when he went back after winning the World Cup, they just said, "Okay, well, we'll take over from here. You've done the bit," and a disallowed try notwithstanding, we haven't won a World Cup since.
Yeah, I mean, without going on about the book, I had a chat with Sir Clive and Will Carling for the book, and both of them I thought were fascinating. With a few years' distance, exactly some of the themes that you've picked up there. I think there's no question that rugby's administration hasn't kept pace. I don't think, or hasn't. The Six Nations is essentially a members club. They don't have to they don't have to open their doors to anybody else. They don't have to have promotion relegation. Well, that's fine up to a point. It's the golden goose for rugby in the Northern Hemisphere. You don't want to muck about with that too much. But what about Spain? What about Georgia? What about Portugal? How are you going to really improve rugby? And the only way you improve is to play against people better than yourself and on a regular basis. So yeah, there is a frustration there, I have to say. For me, they're hoping to have this new competition from 2026, the Nations Cup, which will sort of formalize those tours a bit more, and potentially in the future, I use the word potentially advisedly, but the idea is that it's to have promotion and relegation in the future, and hopefully, as I say, a bit more opportunity. But yeah, there is a frustration. Fingers crossed that that's changing.
But the problem is, more games. Rugby isn't, as Nigel Owen said, this is not soccer. Rugby is a contact sport. And the players are getting fitter because they're professional, and that means the hits are bigger. And we're seeing what's happened to players like Phil Vickery, and that is a worry, that is a concern, because obviously if you're taking these hits, there can be some long-term damage. And if you are the parent of a child who's playing rugby, and I remember reading Matt Hampton's book Engaged a couple of years ago, and that's, if you haven't, anybody out there hasn't read Engaged, it is the most mind-blowing book about what it's like to suffer an injury. And I've heard Haskell, because Haskell was on the training field when he had his injury. That's got to be surely something that rugby has to address, but we've got to do it without losing the contact of the game. A, for people who want to play, but B, for those at the top of the sport if they're not going to burn out in 2 years.
I think there's two things there. I think if you talk to anybody, they'll say that the scrummaging, which is where Matt Hampson hurt himself, is a lot safer now than it ever was. I think that's fair to say. There are clearly, all of us feel desperately sorry for the former players who are suffering, the after effects. Potentially, you don't know until you've had your posthumous, you've had your brain examined and all those things. But there's a pretty strong link, as we know. I think it boils down to the training as much as anything else. I think if you talk to the people who really know their stuff on this, they'll say that, look, the training load is massive. It's no point in the old days you'd bone on bone and all week, and we're probably the vintage where we'd run around and you have a heavy tackle, you get up, you go, oh no, look, I've got to look big and strong, I've got to get it back out there. We're a bit cleverer now. People are a bit cleverer, and I think the protection of younger players in particular has never been better. So yes, I think there's a cohort in the middle who are clearly have issues with, and that's all, as we know, that's all going through the legal process at the moment. But if I was, having a word with kids, I've got, some rugby playing kids of my own. you've got to remember the benefits as well, the positive side that we spoke about in advance. You know, the teamship, the fellowship, the confidence that you get, as I was going to say, the wind through my hair. I haven't got much hair left.
Same here, mate. That's because I was a hooker in the scrum and it rubbed all my hair off. That's my excuse.
Yeah, exactly. No, so I think you clearly there's a need to be vigilant as make the game as absolutely safe as possible for everybody's sake. But equally, as I say, there are a lot of good aspects to it that I shouldn't get chucked away in the wash.
Absolutely. I mean, because there are certain things in rugby that you remember. I mean, obviously in my glittering career, not so many, but I still remember being on a muddy field with 5 minutes to go and, packing down and going for a try and just being with other, this is going to sound very strange, being with other guys all pushing towards one aim. And that is when I was 15. So that is 40 years ago. And I still remember the exultation when we go over the line. And then the fun and games, and then as I got older, obviously the peripheral things, because I was playing out of Richmond, and that is rugby central, and the great times that we had, and the camaraderie, and the fact you could go down to Twickenham with a pair of boots and get a game on a Saturday morning.
I'm impressed you actually got over the try line. I mean, that's it's better than
I was pushed from behind. There was a guy from behind going great guns. My little feet didn't touch the ground. Trust me, I've never walked the same since.
No, I couldn't agree more. I think it's I'm not going to talk you through my.
Come on, there's going to be one. Come on, Rob, there's going to be one.
Well, I retired when I was about 2021, but there was one game, and I used to play sort of fly half, full back. Somebody pops you into a bit of space, and you go, whoa, this is what it's all about, and you're through, and actually, it sounds odd, but the shape of the ball was a big thing for me because you could use your hands. It always struck me that football was really limiting. You could only use your feet, and I would go, well, hang on, what's the point of having hands? So I don't know. I was a kid and growing up in the country. There wasn't much else to do, so I was probably you had to use your imagination a bit. And I always felt that with rugby, there was plenty of scope to use your imagination. There were so many avenues you could go down. All that, the sort of chess element of sporting chess, if you like, of rugby has always interested me.
So when it comes to the state of the game and the health of the game, where do you think we are, Rob? Are we in a good place? Are we better off than we were sort of 10 years ago? Or, I mean, people still go on about the 73 bars against New Zealand. But then again, the guys used to just pack up and go home. Do we still, is the grassroots rugby still in a good place?
I think men's grassroots rugby, probably not. I think if you look at the stats, certainly in the UK, I don't know about France so much, but there's so many other demands on people's time, aren't there, these days? The family stuff has extended. I think, if you look at youth rugby, it's as strong as ever, boys and girls, and so in terms of the overall figures, you could say, well, hey, that's really still healthy. I think where they've got a problem, as I say, is the adult men's game. You can't, to imagine to play from they're just starting now on the August friendlies all the way through to, as you say, sort of April, still playing sevens or cup stuff in May, and you're an amateur. That's a bloody long season, So yeah, I think they've got to be a little bit careful. I personally think that, the spirit of rugby's alive. I think the torch, the flame is still there. It's flickering a bit because of some of the legal stuff that's going on. I mean, there's been stuff in Australia with Aussie rules. If insurance for some reason becomes an issue, then everybody's got a problem. As I say, personally, you can only look at what you see on the pitch, and actually, if you watch the Premiership or the top 14, it's definitely popular. It's definitely as attractive probably as a product as it's been. They just need to possibly accentuate the positive, get themselves organised in terms of the competitions that they're running. Yeah, I think people still love their rugby. They just need an excuse to be told, hey, it's okay to love rugby, because rugby is, and the key word is a 3-letter word, it's fun.
Yeah.
Rugby's got to be fun, because if rugby's not fun, it gets too serious, doesn't it? And it hurts, and it doesn't look like the easiest game in the world. Well, it's not. But as I say, if you make it fun to watch, if you make it fun to play, then suddenly the sport's in a good place.
And of course, the European competitions. You get to see the Toulouses, the Toulons, the French sides, and they, for those who don't want to fork out the money or can't get to internationals, going away to see one of those teams is just an experience for fans as well, and also the fan experience, because after what we see with football, and luckily we got off pretty lightly with the Euros, but rugby is different. You can stand in a stadium next to somebody. You can stand in the bar afterwards, and 9.99 times out of 10, you have a great evening.
Yeah, and I don't know if you agree, but I think the visiting supporter has been absolutely key, certainly for the Six Nations. People wonder why the Rugby Championship doesn't quite have the same sort of cachet, not cachet, but appeal down south. It's because there are very few visiting supporters. You don't get, in Edinburgh, there'd be Welsh supporters up there from the Monday, Tuesday. Maybe not a fewer now, but to go to France, as you say, is a massive deal. I think the travelling supporter, you don't want them priced out, because they're a key part, I think, of the fabric of rugby. Because if people got to care, it's not something that's flickering up on the screen in the back of the room and some television somewhere. It's got to mean something.
The visceral, but the fun as well. The fun of sitting there and
I think so, and the camaraderie. It is you were alluding earlier to sort of men not being able to sort of talking about being able to enjoy themselves, yes, or connect, like talking, and actually rugby is good at that. And now we're in a different era where hopefully people are talking about stuff if they're having a bad day. Rugby should be even better for that. You can talk to somebody in the clubhouse, or you can drag a mate aside and all that sort of thing. So I mean, without getting too silly about it, I really do believe it has elements to it that many other sports don't have, even now, just in terms of the character building element of it and the camaraderie, as I say.
When you talk to people, this is all well and good, Rob, and we can be inclusive. Women's rugby is fine, the whole thing, we can talk. When you speak to, say, members of the England team, a Delalio or a Jason Leonard or any of the Hastings or any of the Welsh team, they must be extremely grateful that social media wasn't a thing when they were running around. Because you hear some of their stuff, and our rugby dinners are the best, and the after dinner speakers are the best. But there are some tales there that must make that crop of rugby players, before the advent of social media, extremely happy they played when they played.
Well, I think it's definitely true that it's people say, it's the media are too been, you get you're too tough on these modern players. Well, it's not really anything to do with the media. It's to do with the invention of the camera phone has changed everything, because anybody can just take a picture and lob it online. So yeah, I think if you talk to, they're lucky to remember some of these stories, to be perfectly honest. I think say some of them may have happened. Some of them may be true. But no, I think, again, I keep coming back to the same word. It's got to be fun, and yes, there was more alcohol probably involved in those days, but I don't think as we all know, you don't necessarily have to drink, 8 pints out of a Wellington boot to have a great night out, Well, it's all. I don't know about you, but some of us do anyway.
Yeah, but it's all done between consenting adults as well, both on the pitch and off the pitch.
Yeah, and as I say, and women's rugby, I think more power to it. As I say, they are so impressive. The women's players who, up until very recently, have been had a day job to fit in as well. Motherhood, whatever it is, they're trying to fit in around their rugby. Massively impressive. So again, I think I'd urge people to watch the Women's World Cup next year. I think it'll be a really good event. What
do you hope that people are going to take from around the world in 80 minutes?
Well, I think that rugby isn't just I always, as I say, I'm a country boy, and there was a temptation for people to think in England, certainly, that rugby is just Twickenham. Look, it's.
I can hear people in Cornwall sharpening their knives on that one, but as soon as you say
it is. It's Blazers and it's that, but it never was, and it was never true. That's the sort of perception that it's for, I don't know, posh kids or people who like, I don't know, a certain type of person. And it's not true, as I say, coming from the West Country myself. If you talk about, parts of the Midland, parts of Gloucestershire, Forest of Dean, Wales, we could go into deepest Argentina, we can go to South Africa. We're talking a massively broad church. I've just been in New New Zealand. Now, you can argue that New Zealand, the love of rugby. I'm not saying it's diluted, but there are other things in life that didn't used to exist. Before you milk, you sheared the sheep, you milked the cow, and then you went and played rugby. And that was about the size of it. There's a few more things to do these days, even in rural New Zealand. So, no, I think rugby still has its how can I put this? Absolute hotbeds that you need to retain. But I think Wales, for example, it's not as the religion that it used to be, and I think it's possibly in answer to your question, what I hope this book achieves is that it's not just about the obvious places that we think that rugby is big in. It's actually there's narrative strands, really interesting people and places all across the world where they love their rugby. Rugby means a lot to them, and actually they're very keen to play a lot more of it.
What was, we're talking about places, and just one final, we'll let you go. What was the most fascinating? Because obviously we know New Zealand, it's a religion. South Africa, I mean, come on, the Rainbow Nation, etc., etc. But where has been the most sort of surprising place for you? Has it been somewhere like Tbilisi, Georgia? Has it been Portugal, like you said, who played their absolute hearts out? What was the place?
Yeah. Well, it's very interesting. I mean, I'm did where you caught me. That's a very good question.
Have my moments,
Yeah. No, I think let's have a think. I'm spoiled for choice here slightly. But we went
three then. Do three. We've got 40. Do three. Do three.
Well, one is Japan, where you would. It's a very much the top corporations in Japan fund the teams. There is a bit of an old school thing. They love that. I think back in the day, a lot of their sort of executives came and studied in England and picked up the game and exported it back. But it's wonderful to go there and see the enthusiasm with which they're playing. I was there on England's tour in the summer, and the national team's results go up and down, but there is an enthusiasm there. I still think that we could all learn from. I think, I mean, I know Australia is very dear to my heart. I went there as a kid and traveled all the way around and played a little bit out there, and to actually play rugby in Australia, you get that. It doesn't matter where you play. It's a cup final every week. They're so competitive as a nation, and so it was lovely to go there and then talk. Talk to Campo and talk to Michael Liner, who's another great player. But talk to Mark Ella. Now Mark Ella would be right up there on my list of all time great fly halves, and to talk to him was an honour. And then you can't beat. I mean, Wales. It's not in the book, but I went down there the other day and went up to Max Boyce's home village for the Guardian, who I work for, and spoke to him, and we went and had lunch, and it was like I wouldn't want to compare it to meeting the Pope, but it was pretty close in a Welsh village. You couldn't get much more important, and he was a wonderful man, and he lived and breathed. Just the fabric of rugby. And as he said, the pubs have shut, the collieries have shut, pretty much everything is shut, but the rugby club's still going, and it's sort of a beacon of light in maybe quite a tough environment. I love that sense of it being a really important thing still.
The thing is, you see, my mother was born in Glasgow. My father is from Treorchy, and I'm born in England. And so Five Nations, as it was, used to be quite something around our house. And one of my earliest memories of my grandfather, who was born obviously in the Rhondda, is him phoning me up in the mid-70s, obviously over-refreshed from a pub, giving it 10 cents because Wales had once again beaten the English. And those sort of memories, maybe you just don't get from basketball.
You don't, and I should add that right at the end of the book, my former colleague Eddie Butler is sadly no longer with us, and we went to his memorial service in Abergavenny, and all the great and good of Welsh rugby were there, and it was a wonderful occasion, and had such humour, and they had a Welsh choir, a male voice choir in there at Eddie's sort of request. And one of the things he really loved, and do you know what it was that he really loved? He asked them to sing was the Fields of Athenry, sung by a Welsh choir in the old market in Abergavenny. And I tell you, it was that's when it really struck you that rugby, it's a game, like anything else, it's not perfect what is, but actually it can touch places that other sports can't reach.
The book is called Around the World in 80 Minutes in Search of Rugby Greatness by Rob Kitson, who's speaking today. If people want to find you online and say nice things to you, where can people find you, Rob?
Well, you could try X at Rob Kitson on what used to be Twitter. I think that's probably the best bet. But or read the Guardian. Read the Guardian online. There's a new season coming up. So I'd love to have any new readers out there.
And make sure you donate as well, because it's because we need to. And you'll be able to order the book from our own virtual bookstore. The book is called Around the World in 80 Minutes. It's by Rob Kitson. Rob, thank you so much for your time today.
Pleasure. Really enjoyed it.